Right. So, last time we discussed, we did speak, through a session that was arranged by Carla and led by was it Lusani? And then I did promise that we will have this session so that we can just talk about study and the exam technique, or simply the nature of actuarial exams. This is in line with our efforts to develop actuarial, to develop the actuarial profession on the continent, and Malawi being a very new, a new baby on the horizon, developing their own profession. We just thought that we would hold these sessions from time to time and discuss issues. So I will go through, my talk. And then we can leave a few minutes for a few questions that can come from you guys. Otherwise, yeah, let's get on with it. Now, what I thought I would do is that, so I prepared some talking points. I've emailed those to Carla. Carla will share with Moses and then everyone else after we have discussed. So let me start by saying, my understanding is that actuarial development or actuarial education in Malawi is still at its infancy. And we have got two universities, from my understanding, University of Malawi and it's the University of Blantyre, or Blantyre University. And most of you here seem to be from University of Malawi. And I also understand that these are new programs. No one has graduated yet with an actuarial degree. So most of you are still students at university, still studying for your undergraduate. So that's my understanding. And then I also understand that we have a few people still writing their exams. People like Edwin, almost finishing, almost qualifying with 2 subjects remaining. Is it 2 or 3? I think it's 2 subjects remaining. So the profession still needs to develop a great deal. And there's going to be a lot of work over the next 5 to 10 years to get to where we need to be, to actually have locally produced actuaries practicing in Malawi. And these sessions, I hope this is not the end, it's only the beginning. We will continue to hold them. Then I would like to highlight, when you are writing, when you are still at university, when you finish your university, you will have to progress through actuarial exams to eventually qualify. And one of the best ways that universities can do is to seek accreditation of their programs from international professional bodies. What that does is that it helps students get exemptions from the subjects that they would have done at university, assume they've passed at a minimum level, a minimum required level or mark that would have been agreed between the university and the accrediting institution or professional body. So that's something the Actuarial Society of Malawi should work on together with universities. Your programs are still new. Most accreditation require you to have been teaching actuarial science for at least 5 years. There's nothing that stops students from applying for exemptions on a subject by subject basis or case by case basis. Usually you can get exemptions easily in statistics. Then there's accounting and corporate finance, if it's included in your program. Those subjects are usually easier to just get exemptions so that you don't have to write them or do them again, assuming you pass them at a minimum level or minimum, you get a minimum mark. And that exemption process requires you to submit your syllabus, a detailed syllabus, and a whole lot of information that may be asked. So you guys need to keep that in mind, that you can do that. And what are the professional bodies around the world? Now I can mention 2 or 3 or 4. So we have got the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries, which is the UK Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. Then you have got the Society of Actuaries, which is North America, effectively the US and Canada. You also have the Casualty Actuarial Society, which is also North America, which is the US, and that concentrate mainly on general insurance, which is the short-term insurance mainly. You have got, you also have got Australia, the Actuaries Institute of Australia, which is also a highly regarded and recognized professional body. You've got Actuarial Society of South Africa, which is just here. I belong to the Actuarial Society of South Africa. Again, that's another one, which you could join as a student and start writing your exams. So those are just a few that I've mentioned. The choice is yours. You might be closer to South Africa, so you might join the South African one. You might want to join the UK one or the American one. The choice is yours. Then in terms of international recognition, all of these that I've mentioned, these professional bodies, all have international recognition. So for example, Actuarial Society of South Africa has got a mutual recognition agreement in place with Australia, with the Canadian Institute, although the Canadian Institute also uses the Society of Actuaries exams. It also has with the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries in the UK, which means the qualification is portable. So you can work in any of those territories. All you need to do is when you prevent, let's say you qualify or you get the intermediate certificates like Associate of Actuaries, or in South Africa, what we call TASA, which is the technical member of the Actuarial Society of South Africa. It is portable, you can use it in other jurisdictions as well. If it's at fellow level, all you then need to do is to write a practice module, which outlines or talks of the regulatory practice in a particular jurisdiction. Society of Actuaries, I don't know which mutual recognition agreements they have. I don't know what they recognize. I suppose that's the North American one. I suppose if you want to join that one, you're going to have to find out whether they actually recognize which other international organization. So that's the good thing about the actuarial qualification. That's the good thing about taking actuarial exams. Very portable, very international. You can literally walk into any environment, and you do that practice module and you're able to practice. Lots of actuaries migrate from South Africa to Australia or the United Kingdom, the other way around as well. Some actuaries migrate from the UK to South Africa, although that the number is not that many. So you find that. Then in other European jurisdictions, you also have actuarial associations if you want to join them. But language issues can be an issue. So let's get into the exam. Now that you're at university, the last talk I spoke about some of the things we were doing. And, when I was taking these exams, from 1996, 95, 96, there was no internet. There was nothing. Everything was manual. There were no electronic exams. There was nothing. But we still had to learn a few tricks on how to pass these exams. So I'm going to discuss today briefly, in order, the earlier subjects, which are the ones you are doing at university. Then the higher level subjects, which is the fellowship level subject, the principles one, and the advanced fellowship subjects. So let's start at the earlier subjects. So when you are studying these subjects, be it statistics, financial mathematics, contingencies, loss reserving, any of these subjects, they are the basis of actuarial science, and they can be very difficult. They can be very tricky. During my time, we used to even struggle with the notation. There's just the notation, age, reducing annuity, all these kind of things. It can be very confusing. So what you really want to be doing is reading the notes thoroughly so that you understand them. And reading the notes, there is no excuse. There are no shortcuts. You've got to read them generally, usually more than at least 2 times, but usually more than 3 times. So the first time is really reading to understand. You're doing all those practice questions in the end, or you're doing the question and answer bank, or whatever it is that you're doing. If you're using textbooks, depending on the nature of the course, textbooks sometimes are actually more confusing, but they give you also very good grounding, good theoretical background on some of the formulas behind, how they're derived and all those kind of things. You need to read and understand. As you are studying, as you are reading, you need to allocate adequate time towards the reading. This is not the kind of degree where you don't put in the effort. You may be highly intelligent, but if you don't combine your intelligence with the effort, with the work, chances are you won't really move fast. You won't get there. You normally struggle. You normally fail. And if you're at university stage, you potentially start having supplementary exams, or may not even finish the degree. So you need to be reading to really understand. And if you read 2 times, 3 times, like I said, 4th time, it helps, and it's important. When you are reading, try and summarize some of the issues. Try and highlight areas that you have not understood. This is mathematical. Most of them are mathematical, but you'll find that they will also require some bit of explanation of certain things we have done. I think some of them are multiple choice now, which is even harder because you have to have the exact answer. At least when it was not multiple choice, you also get marks on your working and all those kind of things. I remember when I wrote what you would call statistics 2, most of you, that is loss reserving distributions, statistical distribution and like. It was a very difficult subject when I was doing it at university, very difficult, because the issues covered were really deep. So application was quite tricky. And then I didn't get an exemption in that. But then I sat down and I wrote it. The actual exam itself, which was the Institute of Actuaries exam, was also very difficult. And I think I left a lot of questions in the middle, right? I still passed it because of the working. I think they gave me marks for working. But I left a number of questions in the middle, just, not knowing how to proceed. That the paper was just bad, Even after doing past papers that were good, my paper I wrote was tricky, was bad. I think you can, if it's still there, you can look at it. That was in 1999, the second semester one, the September one. You can check it. So it requires careful study. Now, one important thing is that when you have studied, and one thing that can help a lot of people, especially with these earlier subjects, try and practice past exam papers under exam conditions. Practicing under exam conditions, if that's not something you have been doing, is extremely important, because firstly, you're trying to imitate or repeat, or trying to simulate what you will actually be doing in the exam. So that's what you'll be doing under exam conditions. But secondly, there are concepts that are tested there that you are going to likely get more by practicing these exams. So those are 2 important things: simulation of the actual exam, and then learning techniques and new techniques. What you will find with these exams sometimes is that a question may come and it appears as if it's a similar question as before. You need to be careful with that, because typically something would have changed. It might be the discount rate that has changed. It might have been a similar question with an increasing annuity, for example. But then the next question is in another paper, another year, another sitting, is actually reducing or decreasing annuity. It might be a whole life policy in another exam. And then the next exam, it might be an endowment policy. Even if the concept or the principle is the same, even the way it's set out is the same. So it's extremely important to train yourself to read very carefully what the question is asking. Usually a scenario is set up. You are given a scenario, and then you have to consider all the issues that have been raised in that scenario in order to answer the question. So question reading is quite important. It may appear as if it's the same as the previous question, but there will always be some things that have changed in the way the question has been set, or the issues that are being tested. So practicing under exam conditions will help you to pick those. I would normally suggest a minimum of 5 past exam papers. Those of you who are at university, you can use university papers to try and see if you are now at the right level. You could also download papers from the Actuarial Society of South Africa website, or the Institute and Faculty of South Africa, or Institute and Faculty of Actuaries in the UK. You can download those past papers relating to the subject that you are studying or that you want to practice. And also try and practice those, because the papers and the answers are there, to see whether you are close to where you want to be. So once you've gone through the notes, you've done all the question and answer bank and all the exercises that you need to do, you need to move to past papers. And when you're doing past papers, what you need to do is, after doing it under exam condition, you then sit and spend time. Some of you can even try and do it in groups, 2 or 3. Then you spend time looking at your answer, cross-checking with the examiner's report to see where you might have gone wrong, and then try to refer back to the notes. If it means you have to research a bit further on things that are not in the notes, that are maybe in the textbook, or if you are using textbooks at all, or if you're using the Institute or the Actuarial Society material at your university, then that's even better, because some of the stuff might be a bit simplified in there. So you cross-check and you mark, look at the examiner's report, look at your paper, what you have done, and then do any other extra check or investigations that you may have to do. You will start to see a difference. You can do a paper, same paper, twice or even 3 times. So after you've done it now, let's say you give it another week or 2 weeks, try to do it again under exam conditions. That's when you will see your progress. That's when you can see that if last time you didn't do very well, when you do it again the second time and you go through the process, same process of understanding, you will find that you pick the concepts, you pick the techniques. Applying this approach is likely to be very good. It's likely to really assist you in getting what you need in terms of passing. So that's it as far as earlier exams are concerned. You do that. Some of the subjects are easy. Accounting and corporate finance is straightforward, borrowed from other faculties. You still apply the same technique, but try and pass those so that at least even if you apply for exemptions, your mark is high. Those are subjects you can get 80, 85%, 90%, most of those, because they're a bit straightforward. As long as you put in the effort, you can actually pass them with some of the highest marks possible. So that's that with the earlier exams, which you guys would be doing currently, even concentrating on at university. Follow this approach, and you might surprise yourself. Because at the end of the day, some of you want to go ahead and qualify as actuaries, which is quite rewarding, which is quite good. Some might end in the middle, but having this degree with those earlier subjects that I've spoken about can place you in many, many areas of actuarial practice, from banking to insurance companies, with insurance companies, short-term insurance, life assurance, and then reinsurers as well. Healthcare, you can practice there, and pensions with retirement funds, providing advisory work, doing calculations, valuations. You can do all of that. There's also enterprise risk management. You can work anywhere, even in telecoms, applying those techniques. Some of your programs have got data analytics now at university. I hope yours has, but the professional exams now definitely have data analytics included. So you can work as in the data analytics area, the data analytics field. Investments is another area where you can work. So the actuarial profession opens a lot of doors where you can actually apply the techniques you would have learned with these earlier subjects that you're doing that take you to a technical level kind of qualification. Now, beyond that, beyond your university, you need to start thinking ahead. Because beyond your university, I don't know what your program has. It might have some of the earlier subjects, or maybe they will be introduced later, but you will certainly have to do them post-university for you to then qualify as an actuary, either as an associate actuary or as a fellow. These professional exams are at principles level and at advanced level. And they cover all these areas I've spoken about: the ERM, pensions, healthcare, investments, life assurance, general insurance, banking. They do cover that. So far, South Africa is the only one that's offering banking, and there's an international exam at the fellowship level. But the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries will also be offering banking from 2022. It's being designed from the Actuarial Society of South Africa, working together with the Institute. So that's also another area that is tested at fellowship level. And what's so peculiar about these exams, even the earlier ones, they are practical. Actuarial science is applied. It's an applied science. They are practical. It doesn't relate to derivation of formulas. They are there, to derive, to know the theory and how to derive the formula. It just helps you to think through issues, but they are practical focused. You will see even in your earlier subjects that it's application-based, practical, but even more so and more important at fellowship level. So your answers, when you're answering an exam at that level, you have to be thinking from a practical perspective. There's a certain level of thinking, which is critical thinking, that is required, analyzing and synthesizing information that you have been given, so that you can understand the situation that has been presented, using information in the question, and also thinking from a practical perspective, what's exactly happening in practice, what you do ordinarily if you were practicing and there's a problem that has arisen and you now want to solve that problem. You have to approach it practically from a practical perspective. And that is what the fellowship subjects do test you. And they assume knowledge of all the earlier subjects already. So they assume, so you have to do well where you are at that level, at that stage, so that you understand all of these principles at that stage. Because at fellowship, that's assumed. It's assumed the information and assumed knowledge. At that level, there's now need for application of judgment, so that, when you now have got your number that you have calculated, and you now want to make recommendations, applying judgment, that is what is tested. If it is a subject where it is a practice where you need to set assumptions, you need to choose a model, all of these things, you also do them in the earlier subjects. But then at fellowship level, you're now applying. You now need you're faced with a situation, be it a pension fund valuation, or you're doing IFRS 9 expected credit loss modeling, or you are doing even IFRS 17, which is actually very topical these days. You have to choose a model, an appropriate model, and then you need to discuss and come up with assumptions and justify them. You need typically to produce a report, and there are guidance notes on producing reports. There are guidance notes on how you set out, how you communicate issues, which I assume at university you also be touching on a subject on communication, which is probably not sufficient when it comes to delivering at a professional level. So at those higher level, those are the things that then get tested. I did speak about using info in the question to give context when you are answering, depending on the level of exam it is, whether earlier or later. The question usually comes and set context, and you need to understand that context in which it is set, because it is then what you apply. It is then what you use as a basis to formulate a solution or to formulate your answer if it is an exam. I cannot, you cannot underestimate the importance of reading the question carefully. Whether you're writing in the earlier exam or the professional exam, you have to read the question very carefully and make sure that you understand it. So this is quite important. This is why one thing you pick and improve on as you do past papers under exam conditions that I told you. And as you see the errors you have made, and you most likely see that it was as a result of poor reading, poor question reading. So you need to read the question very carefully. Then you'll find that sometimes actuarial exams come with unusual questions, something you haven't seen, scenarios that's painted there. And now you need to apply your knowledge, your skill of the principles you already have that are in your core reading to this unusual question. So don't panic with such unusual questions when you are, when you are faced with such a thing in an exam or whichever, or whether you are practicing or you're now writing the final exam. There will always be those unusual questions. It may be something that's in your core reading, but then the unusual question comes in such a way that you have to apply the situation you would have encountered or seen in your study material. And that's important. And then paying attention to instruction words and the mark allocation is quite important. So these questions will come with many instruction words such as discuss, describe, list, comment, set out, advantages and disadvantages. So there are so many instruction words. Explain. You need to understand what each instruction word means. Whilst you're at university right now, I think Actuarial Society of South Africa or the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries or Society of Actuaries, I think they've got study tips and they've got some of these definitions that they normally provide. Your job is to make sure that you understand those definitions. They guide you when you're now answering the question. They do provide guidance. If it's described, there's a way you need to do it. There's a way you actually need to do it. If it's described, it's different from explain, it's different from discuss, it's slightly different from comment, and so forth and so forth. The mark allocation, if it's these other subjects that are later subjects, will give you an idea of the amount of information you need to include in your answer. And these are usually not calculation type questions, and you will start to encounter them in some of your subjects, even in the earlier subjects. So your mark allocation, is it 2 marks or 3 marks or 5 marks or 10 marks or 15 marks? It will give you guidance on the amount of time you need to spend and the amount of detail you need to include in your answer for it to make sense, for it to earn the marks that you need to earn. Those are quite important. Then in terms of writing, you need to write sufficiently. I normally speak of depth and breadth, which means the answer must have sufficient depth, but at the same time, it must have many different varied points, which is breadth. It must have many different varied points for you to earn all the marks, because you know how it is. If a question comes and say, give reasons why such a particular phenomenon has occurred, there may be many reasons, right? There can be up to 10, 11, 12 reasons for a 15-mark question. It means you need to outline all of those. If you just come and give us 3 reasons or 4 reasons, chances of you losing marks are very high because you haven't covered sufficiently enough. You haven't thought about the issues broadly enough for us to see that you actually understand all the different issues that can arise in a particular situation. So I'm just giving that as an example. It can actually say outline the reasons or outline the issues that must be taken into account or that must be considered. Usually the issues are many and varied, coming from all different areas and from a practical perspective, if it is a fellowship exam. That's important. Those are issues to bear in mind. If you are still at university, like now where you're doing earlier subjects, always bear in mind these are the issues that you start encountering when you now start doing the later exams. Then, sometimes when you're answering, to make your answer clear, to signpost it, use subheadings. These are themes that you may, that formulate the main issues you need to consider. Take them as your subheadings or sub-phrases, and then you expand on them. It just makes it easier to follow. It also avoids you giving a scattergun approach type towards an exam. It also helps you to arrange your thoughts and maybe start with the most important issues first when you're answering a question. So use of subheadings is quite important, quite good. And it also avoids you writing composition and composition. It's not an English literature paper where you have to write a composition describing something. Usually point form is good. It's clear, short and sweet and nice, making sure that you are covering the issues and you are really answering the question as asked. Then you need to look at the nature of the questions. They could be closed questions or open-ended questions. Closed questions tend to be short, also less marks. And the answer is usually very specific. But open-ended questions, they leave room for you to apply breadth. The answer can be many things, as long as you're applying your judgment and reasoning, and you're showing why you're saying what you're saying. And it's in line with your syllabus and your core reading and any extra reading that you do, and you're applying reasoning there and high-level judgment. Then you'll be fine with the long questions. But the danger with such questions, those open-ended questions, is that you can completely miss it because they're open. They're open, they are subject to interpretation. So you can completely miss it. That's why you need to understand the question that is asked and put it into context so that when you're answering, you're hammering on the right things. And then I did speak about point form, which I said is better than long and winded paragraphs with no direction, where you're just applying a scattergun approach. So you need to avoid that, and you need to avoid waffling, waffling and just writing because it came into your mind. Have structure, make sure your answer is structured. It makes it easy to pick up the marks, and it makes it easy for the examiner to also see what you're saying, what you're trying to do. Sometimes you find that a question builds up from the earlier one. So let's say it's question number 2. It has got 2A, B, C, D, E as different parts of the question. Sometimes A builds up to B, B builds up to C, C builds up to D, and D builds up to E. So you need to be able to have read the whole question first, and then you see the overall direction the question is taking. And then you need to be able to use information that you have given in the previous question to build up on the next question. So that's quite important to know that some questions actually come like that. And don't ignore the earlier issues we have touched on, because they have set the context. In your question A, for example, then question B, you're then given a scenario, or they will say, no, now they've decided to change to this and that. You may actually need to be applying or varying the issues you had outlined in the earlier part of the question, or actually using information in the earlier part of the question to expand for the later part of the question. And as you do that, sometimes it's quite important to show your understanding by using examples. Show understanding by using examples, so that you actually show that you're understanding. Some questions, if it's calculation question for earlier subjects, they might come with comment on this or comment on your answer, or it might come like that. And you need to be very careful that you use examples there. You try to be a bit practical to show that you know what you're doing. For example, if the scenario is this, then it means that. Or for example, if the scenario is that, then it means this and that. And it teaches you application of judgment. Those are some of the questions. That's how they may come. And then justifying your points sometimes, or even in most cases, you need to justify some of the points. Why have you said a particular point? Because of this and that. This may lead to lower costs, which may then mean this and that. Don't just leave this may lead to lower costs and you end there. Your answer is incomplete. Usually you lose marks, you drop marks. State the obvious as well. The very obvious thing that's occurring in your mind, state it. Don't leave it out, because that's the answer. That's what we're looking for. State the obvious. For the earlier questions, we even normally say, if your assumptions, you believe that they may not be applicable, they are slightly wrong, state it and say, well, these assumptions may actually not be the most appropriate in this manner or that manner. You are in the exam, but show that you know it, you understand it. So state those things and state the obvious. Don't leave out the obvious, because if you leave out the obvious, that's exactly what we're looking for. And that's why people end up saying actuarial science is very difficult, and because you're complicating it. Don't complicate it, just state the obvious. If she's beautiful, just say, oh, you are beautiful. it's an obvious statement. Say it. Why are you not saying it? So yeah, so that's my point on stating the obvious. There, it's quite important to do that, and that gives you extra marks as well in stating the obvious. Extra reading when you are studying, towards your exam. Extra reading does add a lot of value because it brings practical aspects. You can start to understand other practical issues. So try and read widely, extra reading, but sticking to your syllabus, because always when you're reading your core reading or the main book that you're reading, always cross-check with your syllabus to check, do you now understand? The syllabus says a student must be able to do A, B, C, D, E after this exam or after going through this. So cross-check as you are studying all the time. And when you are then reading extra reading, cross-check how it's applying, how it can be applied within the syllabus that you have got. And that's quite important. Then, as you are studying through in a session, towards the end of the session, I'm assuming that when you are studying, you're writing your summary notes on the side. It's important to aid in your understanding. It encourages active studying as opposed to just studying and hoping to cram and regurgitate information. Actuarial science is not for cramming. If you are someone who has got a photographic memory and you can retain stuff, actuarial science is where you'll find that doesn't work, because it's an application subject, right? And because it's an application subject, it doesn't work to regurgitate stuff. So when you are making your summary notes, it does help you with better understanding, but it helps you in the end. Towards the exam, you take your summary notes, you review all those summary notes, you review the core reading maybe a week before the exam. If you were doing exam practice throughout the session, and start early with exam practice. Don't wait and say, because I haven't covered this, I haven't covered that. Start early in your study program. You can also take those past exams that you have done and you start looking at them. Usually it doesn't take more than 20-30 minutes to look at the summaries or the past exam you have done and the comments you made for yourself. Because when you were doing it, I'm expecting that you'll be making some comments, some notes, just to remind yourself, to refresh your memory. That's something you can do towards the exam. And, my final comments is that examiners are not looking to fail you. Your lecturers are not looking to fail you. Everybody wants you to pass. There is no unfairness. So make it easy for them following some of these principles, some of these things I've spoken about. Just make it easy. The marking itself is usually very rigorous. If it's a university, you'll find that there's an external examiner, just to try to maintain standards. If it's professional exams, when you're at a professional level, you are, sorry, just hold on. Okay, so yeah, so I'm saying the marking is very rigorous, markers do mark. Sometimes the paper is even marked by 2 people. If you borderline, sometimes even a 3rd person. There is a external examiner. They come, they look at the papers. It's a professional level. We have to maintain standards. So the marking is very rigorous. No one wants to fail you. They all want you to pass, but you've got to put in the effort, the work. And when you're done answering your exam, you need to make sure you know what you're talking about, because we all want you to pass. There's no one who wants to fail you. And another point, final point, is if at fellowship level, which is the principles, and especially the final advanced, every answer is an answer in most cases, but there's always an answer that is more appropriate than others. This is where we can see and distinguish you from the rest of the people, because you can give an answer and you get a 0, but it's still an answer. That's fine. So every answer is an answer, but there are answers that are more appropriate than others. So that's something you need to be practicing towards your exam. And with past papers, you will start to get it. You start to catch it, and then when you're in the exam itself, don't panic. There is no need to panic. The exam can be very difficult, but then you must know that everybody's facing the same problem. There is no need to panic. The story I spoke about of practicing under exam conditions can help you to avoid panicking. The environment is the same. There is no need to panic. When you're answering, panic can actually retard your thinking. You may stop thinking for a moment. For you to then come back, time is ticking. That's when you end up not answering some questions. Chances are not good when you don't answer certain parts of a question. You need to attempt everything, every question in the exam. Speed and accuracy is quite important, speed and accuracy, which you get as well by practicing under exam conditions, because speed and accuracy ensures, accuracy ensures that you finish the exam. Accuracy makes sure that you get the answers right. So that's quite important to do all of those things. And with that, guys, there are just a few other tips, like when you're in the exam, don't make disparaging comments. You just irritate the examiner. Don't try and underline, don't try and rephrase the question. A whole lot of small things, small tips. There are no marks, there are no additional marks for all of those unnecessary things. Try to practice them. Then, word of advice, when you have done under exam conditions, you're looking at examiner's report. For earlier subjects, I think the answer is the answer. Sometimes the examiner also gives you an alternative answer. For the later exams, which is the fellowship exams, you need to know. I mean, for the fellowship exams, usually whatever you put in, you just need to know that if you are not doing things in context from a practical perspective, chances of not getting it are very high. Chances of failing are very high. So you may end up struggling. You may end up continuing to struggle. So these are the talking points I wanted to speak about, covering studying, how to practice towards your exam, and then the exam itself, what to do, how to behave, how to read questions well, what to do, what not to do, the way you think, your level of thinking, all of these things, you need to develop them as you are going towards the exam until the day or the date of the exam itself. These are the issues I have. Now, we can leave about 10, 15 minutes for questions and discussions on any of the issues that I've spoken about up to now. So we can open the floor. And I think it will be easier now that there are about 16, 15 of you, 14 or somewhere there. If you raise your hand, and then I'll allow you to speak and we can answer the questions. Thank you. Patrick, yeah, I think there's Patrick Chizalo. You can speak and you can lower your hand.
Okay. Yeah, so my question is the issue of open-ended questions. Sometimes when I come across open-ended questions, my take is that there's no justice, especially these days of human rights. Putting a question that is open-ended, I think that's not justice. That is not justice. You see, against the freedom, the rights of students. What do you say about it? Thank you very much.
Patrick, that is a political question. But what I can tell you is that there is a minimum standard that the profession aspires to, a minimum standard that the profession expects from its members. When we are going through the education system, when we are setting exams, they're not just set from the blue, from the air. There are certain principles that are followed. And if I may understand the definition of open-ended, I don't know what you have understood about it. But when I said closed question or open-ended, closed question typically is a question that has got a specific answer. That's my definition. It is a specific answer it is closed in the sense that you can't go wide. If I ask you, where is a statue of a certain person, and that statue is located in one place at a particular corner with coordinates, that's the answer we need. That's closed. You can't afford to say anything else. If it's a river, to tell me the river, how it flows and winds around. You have to follow those specific coordinates. That is a closed question. You can't tell me that the river goes through the mountain when that is not true, right? No, that's closed. Open-ended questions, as an example, are questions that can say, tell us the issues you might think of or you might consider in this particular aspect. It is open-ended because there are so many issues to consider, although some of the issues are more important than others, right? Some of the issues are more important than others. All these issues are set in the context of actuarial practice. Syllabus. All of these issues are set from the syllabus, so you will already be aware. There is reading material and preparation material. You should have prepared. It's expected that you would have prepared. So I don't see where issues of human rights come from here, because we give you all the information. So I teach as well. I practice. I'm a practicing actuary, but I also teach. We give you everything. What we are testing is your thinking, how you put the answer, whether you have mastered the subject. There is no, what do they call it? We don't hit you from behind and you don't know where it came from. It never happens. Everything is in the context of what you've been given. There it is, study it, then come and write. Let's see if you have studied. Imagine we don't have exams or studying and then we just call everybody and say, come be an actuary. It doesn't work like that. We say you study and then you don't go and study. The only way we can check if you have studied is by testing you. And we can use open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. And we tell you in advance that the question may be open-ended, which means you must know. Because they can be open-ended and you will know in advance before you actually come to the exam. So yeah, but I think your question is with political element. I don't know how to answer it, to be honest, because all the information you are normally given. And the profession is unlikely to relax on its high level of standards that it expects, because we exist in the public interest as well. All these solutions we provide, at the end of the day, they affect people. So we need to make sure that if you're going to design a solution that affects somebody in the world, somewhere, in some corner in the world, you're doing it appropriately and properly so that you don't hurt that person through your solution. That's why you exist as a profession, and that's why we test you. And that's why we mix the questions, multiple choice, open-ended, closed-ended. That's why we use many description words in our questions. Discuss, comment, explain, all of these things. They're just part of studying. It's part of life. But if you don't want actuarial science, maybe you can go and become a hunter or a fisher or something else. What do you think, Patrick? Okay. Otherwise, thanks for the question.
Okay. What I'm saying here, you have to understand. Like here, I came across a question.
Can you please give an example of the question? Please give the subject. Can you give the subject and then the example of the question, and then let's deal with it.
Yeah, regression.
On regression.
Where I know that I don't know where regression. Of course, I'm doing financial mathematics here in Kenya PhD. Now there was a regression question. Okay, somebody he was asking us to get the mean, but then when we get to the answer, the person was requiring us to do test and the like. But the question was just asking, the question was simply find the mean of this sample mean of this data set. But the person was saying that, okay, this question was open-ended. So I was expecting you after calculating the mean, you have to do significance test on the mean. Then when we asked why that, because that is outside the question, saying, no, this question was open-ended. You see, so that's why I was saying that there is against the rights of a student. Because if I have asked the person, find this thing, You don't need to expect the person to give you another answer that is not the one that we have asked there. That's wrong.
So Patrick, don't you believe that's a quality issue? That's something you would take up with the person presiding the question? Because for us at a profession level, we go through a rigorous process. When a question is set, it's sense checked. There are even guinea pigs, people who have already passed through your level, who actually write the paper to test if it's appropriate for students, and it's quality checked and sense checked, and then it is written. So I don't know how it would have operated, who set that paper, where it was. Definitely that would not be an institute paper or Actuarial Society of South Africa or Society of Actuaries, because at that level, you don't find a question that say find the mean, and then you put another completely different answer. That's just not what you find. So, but that's something to take up with, it's a quality issue. Take it up with the people who set the question and justify your thinking from there. I think that will help a great deal. Any other question? Moses, yeah, you can ask. Yeah, Mkwanda, Moses, my friend Moses, you can ask, no problem.
Yes.
You can put your hands down.
All right. Thank you. My question is to do with the exemptions.
Okay.
You talked about the university should run maybe for at least 5 years, like offering the program. Apart from that, do you also consider the presence of actuaries at the university to accredit it for exemption? Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, Moses. There is an accreditation policy for each association that seeks to accredit. I can only speak knowledgeably from the Actuarial Society of South Africa perspective. The policy will have a lot of different requirements. Qualified lecturers, to make sure that we don't have questions that do not make sense. The teaching, the delivery of it makes sense. For some subjects, not all, but some subjects we actually require the person to be a qualified actuary. What some universities have tended to do is to get part-time actuaries, qualified actuaries part-time, which we can facilitate for University of Malawi, for example. So if you guys go and talk to your faculty and you link them with me, we can discuss, and then we can try and source part-time lecturers for fellow status, because that is also one of the requirements within accreditation, just to make sure we maintain standards. Because remember, when you're accrediting a university, we are simply saying they are going to deliver a course in terms of the quality expectations and in alignment with the profession's expectations, which means their course must be at the same level or above the professional standards. That's the only way we then can accredit. And standards and quality is defined even by the type of lecturers you have, their qualifications, how they deliver, the quality of the papers that are set, the quality of the marking, the governance processes, the external examiner, the credibility of the external examiner, a whole lot of things. And you find naturally that actuaries get involved when it comes to accreditation stage. Some actuaries get involved mainly on a part-time basis. I know from a South Africa perspective, we actually have full-time actuaries at all accredited universities working there. For most other universities, they may not be in the same privileged position, which means they can have part-time lecturers. And I can tell you now that there would be a number of lecturers who actually is qualified, who are prepared to travel to Malawi once or twice a month to deliver a lecture and fly out. So it is a requirement. So there are a number of requirements. Some of the requirements, discretion can be applied. For example, if you have been teaching, the requirement says standard is 5 years. There might be discretion to say, well, actually we can accredit it even 2 years, for example. But application discretion, information presented, how you're doing, what you're doing to manage certain risks and certain issues that may arise. Full document that is for those requirements. But like I said, you can link me with faculty, head of faculty or head of department on an email for Blantyre University. of Blantyre International University or University of Malawi, then this is a discussion I'm happy to have with them, and also even to help them improve on their course. It's something we can just give them pointers and what they may need to be doing or looking at, so that they move towards accreditation. The quality should be at the level of the profession's quality. Thank you, Moses. Are you answered? Do you have any other question, or do we have someone else who wants to ask? Any questions, guys? Jonathan, Philip, do you guys have questions? Dalito, Rennie, don't keep quiet, please. This is the time to ask. If I may throw a question back to you guys. How are you finding your study? Where do you think you are struggling? What do you think needs to change? Similar to maybe a question asked by Patrick when he's really not happy with someone who asked him to find the mean, and then they started coming up with other things. Maybe I haven't looked at the question. Maybe the question was actually right. I don't know. But do you have other issues, guys, to do even with your studying your university, how things are progressing? You can ask those things as well in this session. I am happy to allocate another 10 to 15 minutes so that you can answer that. Is there anyone who wants to answer? Kuluma, you can come in.
Good afternoon, sir. I just wanted to make a comment about the question you asked about how things are going. I'm currently in my 4th year, and well, I could say from the 4 years that I've been here, we haven't really had quite good lecturers. So it would be a nice change if we could get better lecturers, qualified actuaries, like you said. If they could teach us, it would be a very big change for us, because this is my 4th year, and I think every semester we have at least one part-time lecturer teaching us an actuarial course, and they are they are sometimes present. Yeah, they're sometimes present. Like, for example, this semester we have pension mathematics, and we've met with this lecturer only 4 times in the last 3 or 4 months. So yeah, we just need better and qualified lecturers, if I could say.
Okay, thank you for raising that point. I can tell you that a lot of universities do struggle with the quality of lecturers. Sometimes it goes down to the funding, how well funded that university is, because most of these lecturers are expensive, especially when you start talking about qualified actuaries. This issue is usually solved over time. Like, you are only the first group. Some of you probably come back as lecturers. You probably start addressing these issues you are raising. I don't think there's a short-term fix, but this is something you definitely need to be taking up with your head of department of the Actuarial Science program and the university faculty, and discuss it, because it's about allocation of money. If you want, for example, lecturers, qualified lecturers, let's say from South Africa or Zimbabwe, because you've got a lot of them that can teach, they want to be paid. So firstly, their flights need to be met. They come in, accommodation and food need to be met. Then you need to pay them an honorarium. Some of them will be working already, not some of them, all of them already work somewhere else. So maybe the payment won't really be market related, but they need to be paid something. So it's an allocation of our financial resources issue. And I definitely feel for you, because that's something. Now, I want to put a comment that will help you guys who are studying. Firstly, I don't know, I think Mulenga is gone out, Moses is still there. Please arrange with your faculty heads or lecturers. I can speak to them. I'm very happy to come and speak at the start of each academic year about these same issues, what actuarial science is like, what to expect, what not to expect, to prepare students to be able to study on their own. I'm sure you know that the professional exams themselves, generally, we were not lectured. When you're now writing the professional exams, you are also working. You're not lectured. There is no lecturer. You need to learn to read the books on your own. You need to learn to read the material on your own and understand it, whether there is a lecturer or not. If you master that skill, you are going to address a lot of the issues you are saying. Because if you read the notes 3 or 4 times, there is no way you can't get it. You will get it. Eventually, you will get it. Form study groups. Because amongst students, there are some students who are better than others. So when you form study groups, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, and you start debating and discussing issues, you are likely to understand the issues and pick them. So generally, my advice is lecturers are great. They need to be there. They will make your job easy, but take it in your hands as well, because you are the one who needs a qualification, but not only a qualification. You really need to know the stuff, because when I hire you as an actuary, say at my company, Clarkson Actuaries, or you're hired by Old Mutual or any of the companies out there, we want to know, even if you have a degree, that you actually know the stuff and you can apply, which means sometimes you can complain, but complaining does not solve the problem. The problem is actually solved by you getting your hands dirty, read the stuff, read the material, you will get it. Do the exam practice I spoke about, you will start to know things and you will pass the exams. That is the advice I would typically give. Thank you for the comment. Anyone else who wants to comment? Anyone else? Philip, Moses, if there are no other comments or anyone who is asking any question, then we can end the session. But I'm happy to wait and see if there is anyone else who has got a burning question. I'm happy to answer it. But some of the issues are solved if you link us with your faculty, introduce us, we can have a discussion with them, 1 hour, 2 hours, guide each other. Because we want to develop actuarial professionals around the world, but here we are concentrating on the African continent, and today we are looking at Malawi. So we can touch on anything. Ufulu, it looks like you want to say something. Anyone else? Rennie, do you want to say something? Moses, you can come, yeah, and you can then lower your hand.
All right, thank you, sir. First of all, I would like to appreciate for this opportunity which you granted us to motivate us to talk to us and share a lot of skills which are supposed to be applied when handling the profession exams. As you pointed out, I'll try to link up with the head of department. I'll share the link because Eva said about it when I was telling him about the other event which we are hosting in the just a few days to come. So I'll link with you. So we will talk on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Moses. Anyone else? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we can call it a day. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being here. So again, recap, study well, read your notes, no substitute for that. Practice under exam conditions. Look at your answer, mark for yourself, form study groups, learn to be independent. That will help you a great deal. Think about the different international professional organizations that you want to join after university. Some of you might even decide to join whilst you're at university. There are usually student rates for undergraduate students. They're usually some lower rates, join Actuarial Society of South Africa, institute faculty, whichever you want. I come from Actuarial Society of South Africa myself, so I can only speak for Actuarial Society of South Africa. You can join, we welcome you. If it's Institute of Actuaries, that's where I qualified. I resigned a few years ago, but I'm going to rejoin again from 1 October. Equally good. You can join that. Society of Actuaries, you can join that. You choose, sit down, choose, find what you want to do. Then you will go on your way to becoming an actuary. Let's hope in 5 years, 6 years time, we'll start to see people qualifying from Malawi, from this group that's at university. Otherwise, thank you. All right. Keep well. Carla, thank you once again for arranging this. Let's do this again. Maybe, like I said, if we are linked with the faculty, Carla will give you the honor to set up what I called, at University Week, orientation weeks, to speak to actuarial students, first years, set the scene for them. Second years, third years, fourth years can join that. And then, we can continue talking about these things. I might also arrange to bring other actuaries, senior students. We might ask Edwin to also speak, because he's almost towards qualifying. We can bring newly qualified actuaries. They can tell you their experiences. They can tell you what they think. The world has changed. I qualified in 2004. These guys qualifying in the 20s, they've had a different experience they can share with you. So yeah, I think we are keen to continue working with you guys. All the best with your studying. Keep well. Bye.
Bye, everyone.